Welcome to the Deep Dive Books channel, where we hope you find something valuable every day.
Recently, the Nobel Prizes have been announced, drawing significant attention. However, as the world's second-largest country, China rarely claims these awards. Why is that? Let's discuss an apparent, yet often overlooked phenomenon. The academic world is dominated by a select few. Academic work has become commonplace, with hundreds of thousands of new PhDs emerging annually from universities and research institutes worldwide. However, the vast majority are engaged in rather mediocre tasks and do not aspire to achieve remarkable accomplishments. You might think that research outcomes are heavily influenced by luck. One might assume that genius should be evenly distributed and appear randomly. Therefore, if funding is sufficient, equipment is advanced, and openness is maintained, China could easily secure 1 or 2 Nobel Prizes each year. In 2013, an academic even predicted that, 10 years from now, international indicators like the Nobel Prize should become common in China, rather than exceptional. Unfortunately, this has not happened. Over the years, China has published a large number of academic papers, many of high quality, but there have been no discoveries that could be considered Nobel Prize-worthy. The research system and social culture may play a role, but there's a particularly hard indicator that, once considered, reveals where we should focus our efforts if we want to win a Nobel Prize. The distance from academic work to the Nobel Prize is actually determined by the distance from researchers to Nobel laureates. The 2024 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to Victor Ambros and Gary Ruvkun. Let's look at their academic lineage. Ambros's PhD advisor was David Baltimore, who won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1975. Ruvkun completed his postdoctoral research under Robert Horvitz, whose PhD advisors were Walter Gilbert and James Watson. Gilbert's PhD advisor was Abdus Salam, while Watson's was Salvador Luria. All of whom have received Nobel Prizes. Now, let's look at the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Among the 3 laureates, 2 are from Google DeepMind working on AI. That's another story. The 3rd laureate, David Baker, is a biochemist. Baker's PhD advisor was Randy Schekman, who won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2013. For most scientists, winning a Nobel Prize is a monumental achievement, but for Ambros, Ruvkun, and Baker, it is a normal accomplishment within their academic lineage. Before the announcement of the 2024 Nobel Prizes, the journal Nature published an analysis examining who Nobel laureates are throughout history. First, location matters. 54% of laureates live in North America, followed by Europe, with very few from developing countries. Moreover, there seems to be a gender imbalance, as the vast majority of laureates are male. An interesting finding from this statistic is the academic lineage of these individuals. One of the Nobel laureates from 1904 is John W. Strutt, who won the Physics Prize for discovering the element argon. Strutt had a student named Sir Joseph J. Thomson, whom we discussed when covering quantum mechanics. Thomson won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1906 for discovering the electron. Thomson had 9 students who won the Nobel Prize in Physics, one of whom was his son. He also had 2 students who received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. In other words, Strutt and Thomson have created a Nobel Prize family. Among their students and descendants, others have also won Nobel Prizes, extending beyond just physics and chemistry. Nature calculated the total number of Nobel laureates who trace their lineage back to Strutt, and the result is staggering. The answer is 228. As shown in the diagram. This figure only accounts for the physics, chemistry, and physiology or medicine prizes. Each colored point represents a Nobel laureate, while each gray point represents individuals in the lineage, who did not receive a Nobel Prize. These are Strutt's direct descendants. Furthermore, many laureates have multiple advisors, and some, though not direct descendants of Strutt, have trained Strutt's descendants, fitting into the same circle. If we include these individuals, along with Nobel laureates in economics, who often come from physicists, we arrive at this diagram. On the right is a vast circle centered around the Strutt family, while on the left are Nobel laureates outside that circle. As of 2023, a total of 736 individuals worldwide have received Nobel Prizes. Among these, 702 belong to the Strutt megacircle, leaving only 32 outsiders. Even among these 32, there are their own academic lineages. Of the 732 Nobel laureates, only 13, represented by the solitary points in the diagram, have no Nobel lineage and achieved success independently. We have yet to consider family lineage. For children from ordinary families, achieving high academic success is challenging. Statistics indicate that, on average, Nobel laureates come from families with economic status higher than 87% to 90% of society. They may not be exceptionally wealthy, but they are certainly relatively affluent. This is not just about money. It's also about education and culture. You may have heard that the 2024 Nobel Prize in Physics was unusually awarded to two computer scientists working in AI. One of whom is Geoffrey Hinton, whom we've mentioned multiple times on this channel. Hinton comes from a remarkable academic family. Hinton's great-grandfather was George Boole, the inventor of Boolean algebra. This family includes mathematicians, writers, inventors, chemists, nuclear physicists, medical professors, and social activists. Given such a family, is it surprising that someone like Hinton emerged? If the Nobel Prize in Physics can be awarded to AI scientists, then perhaps in the future, the prize in physiology or medicine could go to Ilya Sutskever, former chief scientist at OpenAI, given his crucial role in the success of large language models. If you consider AI to be alive, then Ilya has essentially invented a new form of life. A friend of mine even suggested he could receive the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to align AI with humanity. Who was Ilya's PhD advisor? It was Hinton. In fact, Hinton's students and their students form an academic empire in AI. To achieve remarkable academic success, one cannot rely on the old tale of the scholar who studies alone for 10 years and suddenly becomes famous. Nor should one isolate themselves like a folk scientist, seeing fault in everyone. Research has never been a solitary endeavor. One must join networks and seek guidance from experts, as personal connections are crucial. Is this an example of nepotism or even academic corruption, where a few elites control academia and reserve all awards for themselves? Absolutely not. We have often discussed how the scientific community is one of the fairest and most open systems in the world, as science can be experimentally validated, and scientists enjoy challenging one another. If someone receives an undeserved award for subpar achievements, their peers will quickly condemn it. Even during the Cold War, Soviet scientists received their deserved Nobel Prizes. However, there is indeed a network. The academic reputation system tends to have positive feedback effects. Excellent mentors have greater freedom to select outstanding students and collaborators, while gifted students are more inclined to seek out esteemed mentors. High-level talent naturally congregates, forming networks. Those within the circle find it easier to secure research funding and access the best facilities and resources. But more importantly, it is about perspective. Only those within the circle know what is a good problem that happens to be solved right now. Anyone involved in research may have this realization. Tackling low-level problems is not necessarily easier than addressing high-level ones. I used to refer to third world science because I noticed that scientists in the third world also form their own circles and often hold meetings. However, they focus on trivial, inconsequential topics that mainstream academia disregards. They seem indifferent to the significant issues currently impacting their fields, only seeking to publish a few papers for their own satisfaction. Their work is challenging, but how many youth and national resources have been wasted on third world science, serving only to appease academics when it comes to promotions? This is why so few people from China have won Nobel Prizes. You are too distant from the Strutt circle. So you might think, I see. Networking is paramount, and I should join that circle. Isn't that what mentors are for? While there's some truth to this, it's still a lower-level understanding. While it's essential for mentors to guide you into the field, impart knowledge and research methods, recommend collaborators, and introduce resources, this only counts as teaching and not transmitting the way. In 2020, Professor Ma Yifang from Southern University of Science and Technology published a collaborative study between China and the US that identified the elements of transmitting knowledge. The study examined the family trees of 40,000 scientists and over 1 million papers to analyze the impact of academic lineage on scholarly achievements. Indeed, prestigious mentors significantly enhance the chances of their students winning awards, becoming academicians, and achieving stardom by 2 to 4 times. But what exactly do mentors impart to their ments? Ma Yifang and colleagues discovered that mentors provide not only professional skills and academic resources but also a certain hidden ability. The brilliance of this study lies in its focus on mentors who had not yet won awards when they trained their students. These mentors can be divided into 2 categories. Those who, at that moment, have not yet received awards but will in the future. Referred to as future renowned mentors. And those who will never receive awards, called ordinary mentors. At the time of graduation, there are no significant differences in academic achievements between future renowned mentors and ordinary mentors. They offer similar visible academic resources to their students, and within 10 years after graduation, the students' achievements are also comparable. In other words, if your mentor is not yet renowned at the time of your graduation, they won't pave the way for you. You must carve your own path. Interestingly, the students of future renowned mentors show remarkable momentum. 10 years later, their chances of winning awards are 5 times higher than those of students of ordinary mentors, and their likelihood of becoming academicians is 4 times greater. They are more likely to achieve academic stardom. What unique qualities do these yet-to-be renowned mentors, who already possess the essence of greatness, impart to their students? Ma Yifang and his colleagues concluded that, what is hidden is the ability to creatively solve problems and communicate effectively. These skills may not be evident in initial simple tasks. However, possessing them means you are not just a research worker who spends time collecting data. You will think independently, increasing your chances of becoming a master. Thinking and expression require one-on-one mentorship to be truly learned. Ma Yifang and his colleagues also found that the most successful students often achieve fame in fields distinct from those of their mentors. They venture into new areas independently. In other words, what they inherit is not the tangible legacy of their mentors but the intangible values of their teachings. This is the essence of transmitting knowledge. Students achieve recognition not solely due to their teacher's protection, but because they have internalized their teacher's core principles. These data and studies convey 2 important lessons. First, achieving remarkable academic success requires more than just an open attitude. Openness is merely passive. It involves allowing academic exchanges. You must actively engage as well. Many Chinese students study abroad, but their representation among the top scientist students at prestigious institutions like Harvard and MIT remains too low. This is understandable. For American mentors, the academic training and research methods of American students align better with their preferences. If given the choice, they naturally prefer familiar candidates over placing their bets on distant Chinese contenders. This is our disadvantage, and it must be gradually overcome. A more crucial lesson, I believe, applies to everyone. What does academic lineage truly mean? Nowadays, knowledge is widely accessible, and self-learning is relatively easy. Yet, mentors impart unique insights that AI cannot provide. This is what Friedrich Hayek referred to as tacit knowledge, which can only be conveyed face-to-face, akin to a mentor imparting their internal wisdom. While this concept is hard to articulate, possessing it gives you vision, independent thinking skills, courage, and confidence. It enables you to pursue groundbreaking science worthy of a Nobel Prize rather than trivial, inconsequential research.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.